first time I heard something inside the treehouse, it was well past midnight. A soft skittering, like dry leaves dragged across wood, then a whisper, too faint to make out but shaped like my son's name. Caleb. I was halfway out of bed before Marissa even sat up. The house was dark, windows fogged by the cold snap moving through. I grabbed the flashlight, slipped on my boots, and stepped onto the back deck. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the sound stopped. Our yard dissolves into a thick tree line, maples, oaks, hard pines that swallow moonlight whole. In the middle of the yard sits the treehouse I promised Caleb for years. I should have done it sooner, but work, bills, and time have a way of slipping through your hands. When we finally finished it 2 weeks ago, fresh boards, rope ladder, a little window facing the woods, Caleb lit up like it was Christmas morning. I figured that excitement was why he kept sneaking out to sit in it at sunset, talking to himself or to imaginary pals, as he put it. 8-year-olds are basically batteries powered by make-believe. But tonight didn't feel like make-believe. The rope ladder swayed gently even though the air was still. I raised the flashlight toward the little square window. Empty. At least, that's what I told myself. The next morning, everything felt normal again. Sunlight, cereal bowls, the smell of coffee drifting through the kitchen. Caleb practically vibrated with energy, kicking his legs at the table. "Did you hear them last night?" he asked. My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. "Hear who, bud?" "My friends," he said, as if it were obvious. "They were saying hi. They get louder at night." Marissa and I exchanged a look, the kind you give when you're trying not to step on the fragile thing your kid is building in his imagination. "Oh yeah?" I said lightly. "What friends?" Caleb shrugged. "Just the little ones. They live in the woods. They like the treehouse." I forced a smile. "That's so?" "Yeah," he said, then leaned in conspiratorially. "They asked if it's okay they stay there forever. I told them yes." A faint chill slipped across my shoulders. Later that day, I checked the boards under the treehouse out of simple curiosity, construction habit, making sure nothing was settling weird. Beneath the floorboards, in the thin strip of dirt visible between the slats, something had disturbed the soil. Not claw marks, not footprints exactly, more like finger drags. Dozens of them. I told myself raccoons, squirrels, anything normal. But that night, lying in bed, I heard it again. A whisper, clear as breath against my ear. "Caleb." And this time, something moved in the treehouse window, just a shadow, shifting quickly out of sight, small and crouched low, like it was waiting for him to come back. By the end of the week, Caleb was spending every spare moment in the treehouse. Before school, after school, even during dinner, he'd ask, "Can I go back out now?" He'd climb the rope ladder with a confidence he never had on playground equipment, settling inside as if he were visiting roommates rather than make-believe companions. Marissa tried to play along. That's what parents do. "What are your friends' names?" she asked one evening as he stuffed crackers into a plastic container. "They don't have names," he said, as if we were the strange ones. "They don't really talk with mouths, but they laugh. They like when I bring them snacks." "Snacks?" I asked. "Yeah, they can't catch food very well. They're small." He made a gesture with his hands, about the size of a toddler but narrower, fingers a little too long. The shape bothered me for reasons I couldn't explain. That night, Marissa and I stepped onto the deck, listening. Up in the treehouse, we heard Caleb chattering excitedly, but there were other sounds too. Rustling, soft tapping, like something shifting its weight across the boards. "Maybe squirrels," she whispered. "Maybe," I lied. Later, when Caleb came in for bed, Marissa tucked him in and asked, "What do your friends look like?" He smiled sleepily. "Little, dirty. They smell like wet rocks, but they're nice. They get scared when they see grown-ups." I felt something cold unwind in my stomach. The next afternoon, while Caleb was at school, I climbed the ladder into the treehouse to look around. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Damp soil mixed with something metallic, like pennies warmed in the sun. In the corner behind a crate of toys, the wooden wall had been rubbed, smudged, worn down in thin, oily streaks as if small hands had dragged along it repeatedly. And on the floor, crumbs. Not from crackers, from something gray and flaky, like bark, but not quite bark. More like shedding. A chill ran down my back. At dinner, Caleb said something that made Marissa drop her fork. "They're happy I built them a bed," he said proudly. "A bed?" she asked. "Yeah. They don't sleep like us. They curl up. They showed me." I stared at my plate, appetite vanishing. Later that night, while locking up, I caught a flicker of movement near the tree line. Something crouched low, pale against the dark bark, slipping behind a trunk faster than anything on two legs should be able to move. I stepped onto the grass, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam caught the bottom of the treehouse ladder and something else. Tiny handprints smeared across the first rung. Muddy, five-fingered, but too long, too thin, and far too many. I backed away slowly until I reached the deck. Marissa met me at the door. "What's wrong?" "Caleb's friends," I said quietly. "They're real." And somewhere out there, just beyond the reach of the light, something giggled, soft and breathless, like a child trying not to be heard. The night I first saw one of them, it wasn't with my eyes. It was with my ears. I woke to the soft creak of the rope ladder, slow, deliberate, as if something heavier than a raccoon was easing its weight down rung by rung. I reached for the flashlight and crept to the window overlooking the yard. The treehouse window was glowing faintly from Caleb's lantern. The ladder shifted again, once, twice, and then a silhouette darted across the opening. Small, thin, wrong. "Evan," Marissa whispered behind me. "Please tell me that was Caleb." It wasn't. We stood there, frozen, watching the treehouse sway gently. Something bumped against the inside wall, then scraped. A soft, wet clicking followed, like stones tapping together inside someone's mouth. I'd had enough. I shoved on my boots and strode across the yard. The woods swallowed sound strangely tonight. The air felt thick, humid, despite the cold. The rope ladder trembled lightly in the breeze, or something else had just used it. The moment I climbed inside, everything felt off. The corners seemed darker than they should be. The smell of damp earth clung to the boards. The floor creaked under my weight. I swept the flashlight across the room. For a moment, nothing. Then the beam caught eyes. Two small, reflective dots hovering near the back wall. They didn't blink, didn't flinch, just shimmered like wet stones. I froze. The creature crouching there was the size of a small child, but much leaner. Limbs too long, joints too flexible. Its skin looked like pale bark stretched over spindly bones. When the light hit it fully, it recoiled, not from fear, but the way an insect folds itself to slip into a crack. And that's exactly what it did. In less than a second, the thing compressed itself flat, sliding between the wallboards like it was boneless. The wood didn't even splinter. It simply accepted it, like the forest had shaped these things from itself. My breath caught. My chest felt tight, I backed out, nearly slipping on the ladder. At breakfast the next morning, Caleb was humming to himself, dipping his toast in syrup. His shirt sleeve was smeared with dirt and something gray, like the flakes I found in the treehouse. "Buddy," I asked carefully, "did you play with your friends this morning, before we got up?" He nodded, mouth full. "They said you scared them." Marissa stiffened. "We didn't mean to. They said grown-ups are loud," he continued. "But they like me. They like how I listen." "What else did they say?" I asked. He swallowed, thinking. "Just that they want warm places, and they like the smell of our house." Marissa reached under the table and gripped my hand. That evening, while taking out the trash, I saw them again. Not fully, just shapes slipping between trunks. Small silhouettes. Heads too big, bodies so thin the lantern light bled right through them. And as I backed toward the porch, one figure stepped forward, inching into the spill of light. It raised a hand. Long fingers. Mud-streaked. Almost human. It wasn't waving. It was testing how close it could get. And the moment the back door opened behind me, it skittered backward into the dark with a speed no child or animal could ever match. Something in the woods didn't just know our son. It wanted in. By the next week, it was obvious the creatures weren't content with the treehouse anymore. The first sign came one morning when Marissa found the back door unlocked. Not just unlatched, unlocked. Caleb was still asleep upstairs. I hadn't been outside. Marissa hadn't either. But tiny mud tracks, finger-shaped, not footprints, were smeared across the doormat. That afternoon, she pulled me aside. "Evan, I don't think they're afraid of us anymore." I didn't tell her that the night before I heard something pattering across the roof, too light to be a raccoon, too fast to be a bird. I didn't tell her I'd heard whispering sliding down the chimney like dry leaves scraping brick. Instead, I checked the vents, the crawlspace, the foundation. That was when I found the grate under the living room window bent outward, as if something had been pulling, not pushing. We tried to distract Caleb with games, movies, a trip into town, but he kept glancing toward the woods as if listening to voices just beyond our range. "They're lonely," he said in the car. "They said the treehouse is cold." "They don't belong in the house," Marissa said gently. "They want to see it," Caleb insisted. "They asked if you'd let them. I told them yes, but Mom keeps saying no." His voice tightened. "You're making them sad." "Caleb," I said quietly, "you can't invite anyone into the house without asking us first." He crossed his arms, glaring out the window. "They're my friends!" That night, the scratching started. Soft at first, like something testing the siding, then bolder. Scratches traveled along the base of the house, under the windows, across the back door. Marissa closed all the curtains, her hands shaking. "I don't want to live here anymore," she whispered. Near midnight, Caleb stood in the hallway, eyes glassy as if sleepwalking. He reached for the deadbolt. "They're cold," he murmured. "They just want a warm place." I scooped him up before he could unlock it. He fought me for the first time in his life, thrashing, screaming, "Let them in!" His voice wasn't angry, it was desperate, pleading, like he felt their emotions inside him. We locked him in his room, not to punish him, but to keep him safe from whatever was pulling at him. Around 2 a.m., I heard it, a whisper against the living room doorframe. Not Caleb's voice, something smaller, breathier. "Warm, please." Marissa clamped a hand over her mouth. The whisper slid along the wall toward the kitchen, then the porch, probing for weakness. The doorknob rattled, slowly, almost politely. A moment later, a soft tapping came from the second-floor windows, like tiny hands. I inched to Caleb's room. He sat on his bed, staring at the window, smiling faintly. "They found the warm spots," he said. I froze. "What warm spots?" "The places where the house breathes," he whispered. "They can smell them." Outside, something scratched the siding higher than any of those creatures should be able to reach. Something climbing. Something searching for a way in. The house no longer felt like shelter. It felt like a cage we were trapped in, while something clever and patient circled in the dark, waiting for the moment we made a mistake, waiting for an open door, or an invitation already given. The storm rolled in just after sundown, lightning flashing thin and sharp through the blinds, thunder shaking the glass. The wind tore at the gutters so violently the whole house groaned. If the creatures feared storms, they hid it well. The first hit came at 10:42 p.m., a thump under the floorboards, hard enough to rattle the picture frames. Then another from the opposite side of the house. Then another. It was as though something was circling, testing the foundation, mapping every vent and crack. Marissa barricaded the back door with the kitchen table while I pulled Caleb close. His small body trembled, not from fear, but from conflict. He stared at the walls with a hungry sort of longing, like he could sense the creatures on the other side. "It's okay," he whispered to them. "I'm here." Lightning flashed, and every window lit with tiny silhouettes, dozens, maybe more. Some clung to the siding, some crouched low to the ground, some peered through the window slats with enormous reflective eyes. A sharp metallic ping snapped my attention upward. "The vents," I breathed. Something scraped through the crawlspace duct, long nails dragging metal. Then another vent rattled. Then another. In the living room, a vent cover popped halfway off, screws skittering across the hardwood. I lunged at it, slamming it back in place just as something pressed from the other side. A pale hand, small, slick, fingers too long, slid between the grate slits. It reached blindly, flexing, testing. Marissa screamed. I shoved the vent cover hard until the hand slipped back into the dark with a frustrated hiss. Then Caleb began to cry. Not loud, worse, soft, broken sobs. "They're hurting," he whispered. "They want to come in. You're making them wait outside in the cold." Thunder shook the walls. The treehouse outside groaned violently, like something was crawling over the roof, jumping to the gutters, scrabbling sideways across the siding. Then came the tapping. Every window, every door. A synchronized, relentless tap, 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 like 1,000 fingernails demanding entry. "Evan?" Marissa whispered. "They're everywhere." The kitchen window cracked down the center. A small face appeared in the sliver of break, pale, stretched thin, eyes so bright they glowed. Its mouth peeled open, revealing not teeth, but dark, stringy growths that wriggled like wet roots. It spoke, but the sound wasn't a word, just a long, eager exhale of warmth-starved breath. Caleb tore from my arms with a sudden burst of strength. "They're scared. Let me help them." He ran toward the back door, tiny hands reaching for the lock. Lightning exploded across the yard, and in that flash I saw a swarm of them clustered on the porch, shivering, twitching, fingers scraping wood, desperate to get to him. I tackled Caleb before he could touch the deadbolt. He wailed, kicking, screaming, "You promised them! I said you would!" Something slammed against the door so hard the frame splintered. We had seconds. I scooped Caleb under one arm, grabbed Marissa's hand with the other, and we fled toward the garage. The house shook with every blow behind us, doorknobs rattling, vents clattering, windows cracking like ice. By the time we reached the truck, the porch light flickered to life. The creatures were pouring across the yard, Some crawling, some loping, some skittering on all fours, closing the distance as we tore out of the driveway. A final crack of thunder drowned out the last thing I heard. Hundreds of tiny hands slapping against our siding, trying to get in. We didn't stop driving until the highway signs blurred into darkness and the storm was a distant bruise behind us. At Marissa's sister's house, we collapsed into the guest room, mud still on our clothes, rain in our hair, Caleb curled between us, asleep from sheer exhaustion. For the first time in days, the house was still. No scratching, no tapping, no whisper sliding along the walls. Morning felt unreal. Over pancakes none of us touched, Marissa's sister asked what had happened, why we showed up in the middle of the night with our son sobbing and begging to let them inside. We fed her half-truths, wildlife, break-in, bad dreams, anything but the truth. But Caleb knew. He sat silently at the table staring at nothing, fingernails pressed to the wood as if listening to something only he could hear. When the police finally agreed to check our property, they found the house torn apart, windows cracked, vents ripped halfway out, siding clawed in long, sweeping streaks, but no footprints, no blood, no signs of people, just the treehouse. The officer on the phone hesitated before describing it. Looks like an animal nest. Or, I don't know, the boards are warped like something's been rubbing against them. I felt the words in my bones. That night, Marissa suggested we get a hotel, move states, start fresh somewhere without a forest at our backs. I agreed immediately. But we had to return for our things, documents, clothes, Caleb's medication. 20 minutes, in and out. We hired the neighbors to watch Caleb, promising him we'd be back before he woke from his nap. Driving back into the neighborhood at dusk was like sliding into a dream we'd tried to wake from. Every backyard seemed darker than I remembered. The woods felt closer, as if the tree line had crept forward by a few feet. When our house came into view, my stomach tightened. The treehouse swayed gently in the breeze, except there was no breeze. I parked at the curb. Marissa squeezed my hand, her knuckles white. Let's make it fast. Inside, the house smelled like wet bark, the kind of dampness that has nothing to do with weather, the kind that feels alive. We moved quickly, documents, bags, drawers half-scooped into suitcases, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not from the windows, from the walls themselves, as if the house remembered us, as if something inside the wood was listening. When we stepped back outside, the sky bruised purple with evening. I heard it, a soft rustle from the treehouse window, then the faintest scrape. A small, pale face slowly rose into view, peering through the square opening. Not angry, just patient, curious. Its black eyes reflected the dying light like river stones. Another face appeared beside it, and another. Marissa grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. Let's go, Evan, let's go, now! But I couldn't move, because behind the cluster of faces, inside the dark interior of the treehouse, I saw something else. A shape curled where Caleb always sat. A crude bed of shredded leaves and fabric. A nesting place. A home. One of the creatures slid its thin hand across the window frame, tapping softly as if greeting an old friend, as if reminding me. He invited them. I forced myself to turn away, forced my legs to move. We reached the truck without looking back, but as I opened the door, I froze. Caleb was sitting upright in the back seat. He must have woken early. He must have followed us. Or maybe. He smiled weakly. They're still waiting, Dad. My throat closed. He lifted his hand and pointed toward the house. They said you forgot something. I turned. The front door, solid, sturdy, bolted before we'd left, now hung wide open, gently swinging in the windless air. And from somewhere inside the darkened hallway came a soft, familiar whisper. Warm. Please. If you've made it this far, thank you for spending your night with me. Stories like this always leave me wondering what really waits just outside the circle of porch light. What's watching from the tree line while we convince ourselves we're safe inside? If this one got under your skin tonight, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It tells YouTube this story is worth sharing. Drop a comment and tell me what you think those creatures really were, and whether Caleb ever truly came home with his parents that night. And if you're new here, or you just like getting chilled before bed, subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories for more original nightmares every single week. Thanks for listening. Sleep well, and keep your doors locked.